Okay.
So
You can hear me okay? Good. Yeah, so I'm Robin. Thank you for coming down. I'm happy that I actually have the space this year to actually have this many people down to the farm. So, we'll go over, I have this presentation, but then we'll actually go see the farm, in real life. I think it's really helpful to kind of go through the process. You can read, you can, hear about it and all that, but actually seeing it for yourself right in front of you and then being able to ask questions to me is really helpful. So I'll go through this, but do stop me, ask questions. I'll stop after each section and we'll talk about it, ask questions there. And then when we're done, I'll take you through the farm and kind of show you each process and how we do it here. There's multiple ways to kind of do mushroom cultivation. I'll talk about a few, but then you can see how I do it. Okay, so a little bit about me. My background is in biology and geology. I studied paleontology. It's strange, I ended up in mushroom cultivation. But I grew up on a little farm in northern Missouri, so I just kind of have that deep love of growing food. My grandparents had a garden, we had cows, chickens. My parents grow food, so I just kind of grew up like that. And everywhere I've moved, whether it was, I've mostly lived in cities since then, I guess, but I've always had a garden or grown food. And so I think it's important, and it's important for me to kind of show my kids that you can do it and how to do it, I guess. But I started out in my basement. I built a little farm. I used hydroponic grow tents and started growing that way. And then I went to farmers markets and I decided to kind of take a risk, quit my full-time job and focus on mushrooms full-time. So I couldn't do both. It was time consuming. So I was doing mushrooms in the evening, going to the farmers markets on Saturday. And so I decided to focus on the farm and try to build that and see if I can make it successful here in Kansas City. So I got this space in 21. I built the farm in there. And I'll kind of show you, it's really fun, where the line was of the space that I had when I first moved in compared to what you see now. But so right now, I actually need to update that because we're growing, it's actually 2 tons of mushrooms. 2 tons a month right now from this space. So that's a lot of fresh food. And that all stays here local to Kansas City. So most of our business are restaurants. We have grocery stores now. So Hy-Vee, Price Chopper, Hen House. We supply all of them. And then of course farmers market, so direct to consumer, we do that as well. And we were able to open up a little storefront last year to get people down to the farm to buy mushrooms, all of our other products, and just see how we farm and see where their food is grown. So that was really important to me as well. So that's kind of how I got started. So what I'll cover, just briefly, kind of Mycology 101. I think it's important to understand fungi and how it's going to grow so that you can go on to cultivate it. And then I break cultivation into 4 parts. So you start with like your bagging process, sterilization, your inoculation and incubation, and then fruiting, actual growing mushrooms in the fruiting rooms. So Mycology 101. So we have the 5 kingdoms, right? And then we have fungi. It's their own kingdom. For a long time, mushrooms were kind of lumped in with plants, but now we know that they are very, very different biologically, and so we separate them out into their own kingdom. And I believe our government still classifies mushrooms as a vegetable right now, which is fun, but eventually they'll get there and figure it out. But so it's its own kingdom. And when you hear people say that we are more closely related to mushrooms than we are anything else, what they mean is that on the tree that we branched off later on with fungi versus anything else, any of your plants or anything like that. And that's what they mean by that. So mycelium, it's that kind of white string-like structure that you see. If you look behind you, you'll see it growing in the bags. It's that white kind of fuzzy look to it. Looks like thread, but that's the vegetative part of the fungus. And really understanding how and why that grows is really important for cultivation. but that's what extends through kind of the ground, the logs, whatever it is that it's growing on. It'll fully take it over, grow out. Networks can get really massive. One of the largest organisms on the planet is fungus. It's a mycelial network that grows, so they can get very, very large. But how they actually eat, I guess, or digest is they kind of secrete enzymes, they break things down, and they absorb it through that mycelium.
There's a tree, yes.
So there are 10,000 species of mushrooms, but not all fungi produce mushrooms. So there's hundreds of thousands of fungi. We're still finding new fungi kind of all the time, and new mushrooms as well, for that matter. But only 10,000 of them actually produce mushrooms. And the whole purpose of a mushroom is just to be that kind of reproductive structure for the organism to release spores and then kind of do that life cycle over and over. So that's its whole purpose. So here you can kind of see an up close look, the picture, all the thread-like down below the ground is the mycelium, and you have those little pins kind of up that will eventually grow into and form the mushroom. But it starts out as just a little spore, and then it's germinated. I think I have that later on. So there's three types: the mutualists, parasites, and saprophytes. You've probably heard of like mutualists or the parasites, but it's just important to kind of know each one of those. So the mutualists are more like the amanita or the bolite, so they have some kind of beneficial relationship with the organisms around them. They also have some kind of mycorrhizal relationship also. And a lot of times people will want to know, why don't you grow morels, or why can't you grow chanterelles, or things like that, right? Those are the great mushrooms we have growing here, which you can go forage for. But so those ones actually have a mycorrhizal relationship with the environment around them and the plants. And therefore, we can't, or we don't fully understand that relationship, and it's hard to replicate that environment here, you know, inside. And so you can't successfully cultivate like morels or chanterelles, at least right now anyway. And then the saprophytics. So those are going to be the ones that you'll see here. So most of your gourmet varieties are saprophytes. So what that means is they just break down dead, decaying material in the environment. So leaves or logs, wood, anything like that. They just break it down. So they're nature's recyclers is what I call them, right? Without them, everything would just pile up. So they are able to break it down, it goes back into the soil to be recycled for our ecosystem. So here's just a general life cycle of the mushroom. You know, the mushroom itself, the spores, the gills, you know, that can change shape, but this is just the general one. So the spores are released into the air. They meet, they germinate, and start to grow the hyphae. The hyphae kind of spread out as the mycelial network, and then you'll have those little hyphal knots, if you've ever looked at the block really close, right before it starts to pin. And then that pin head will go on to get a little bit bigger and turn into the mushroom that you see that's ready to harvest. And that process can go pretty fast. Some mushrooms it's 5 days, sometimes it's maybe 10 days or so. But that's just the whole life cycle there and the whole purpose of the mushroom. Yeah, so there it is, just the spore formation, the dispersal, germination, the vegetative growth, reproduction, and then spore production again. Yep, so it's important to understand kind of how and why it grows before you take on growing it, just so that you can kind of troubleshoot any problem that comes up, and just so you can have the best replicated environment for that organism. Okay, so that is kind of fungi. Any questions there? Do you guys they have kind of a background before now, or? This is the first kind of cultivation class for a mushroom.
Nature's garbage man. Those are the ones you don't want to eat.
Nature's garbage man.
That's right.
No, those are the gourmet variety.
Yeah, those are the ones that are delicious. Yeah.
Who likes sourdough bread?
Mm-hmm.
That's a mushroom. Yeast are mushrooms.
Yeast. Yep.
What about truffles?
Truffles. Okay. They're kind of an interesting one, kind of like morels. they're fully underground.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually come.
I've plenty of truffles.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, I've never seen them in a farm situation. It's always, you gotta go out with your
Yeah.
dog or your pig to dig them up.
So that's one of those that you can't replicate that. We have no idea kind of how and why those grow. Morels, some people cultivate them, but you just get a handful. It's not enough to actually, make a business on.
Yeah, I got surprised with morels because I got a bag of the spores or whatever you throw down, and it's like, well, why not? I doubt anything's going to grow. And underneath this evergreen tree we had, I just threw them in there. The week after, I got somebody coming over and saying, dude, you need to look under that tree. Just had a huge patch of them.
Okay.
I mean, they were beautiful. I didn't
Yeah.
expect anything to grow out of a bag full of powder.
You usually don't. Most people say, yes, I tried it, but it didn't work. So
Are they as good too?
to eat,
Yeah, the ones that you cultivate.
I've never eaten cultivated ones,
No.
just foraged. I have had other cultivated mushrooms, like versus the forage, and they can taste different. Sometimes they're a little bit less flavorful. A lot of times the texture is also different as well. But I haven't had a cultivated morel that I know of. Okay.
What's your favorite mushroom?
It's the maitake. I also call it hen of the woods.
Okay.
It grows around here. You can go find it. It's a fall mushroom.
Have you ever seen the
Yeah.
pink shrimp mushrooms?
Yeah, we had some.
They're pink, but they actually do taste like shrimp when you cook them. They have a bit of
I
a
heard of
seafood,
lobster.
briny.
Yeah, we have lobster
Yeah.
mushrooms around here.
And lobster, the only reason I bred those is because of the fungus or something on it, right? From what I understand in coloring school. It was just because there's something,
I don't know that. I don't know.
they told us it was because there's something on it that makes it red.
You were growing maitake when I first started selling for you. Right? You were cultivating it?
No.
Or
We would get it in from foragers. Yeah,
Oh,
or bring it
okay.
in. Yeah. Yep. That's the only way I've gotten
did
it.
you try it?
We haven't tried yet. You can buy kind of the spawn to try it, to grow maitake, but the process is about, it's at least 9 weeks in incubation. So, you got to be invested. You got to have a lot of space for some of the varieties. Yeah.
Is foraging a pretty big industry in Kansas City?
Not that I know of. More like the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, I
They
know.
have an abundance of forageable mushrooms. The seasons are longer that they grow here. For us, morels, kind of 3-4 weeks maybe, but chanterelle season is a lot longer. And we have more chanterelles than morels in Missouri. But for some reason, everyone goes crazy for morels. But chanterelles are just as good.
I love
I think
Yeah.
they're better.
Does that rainforest it's a better environment because of the cool dampness?
Yeah, there's more rain, less direct sun. It's cooler temperatures, so they grow more.
Do you ever do like tours or group whatever foraging?
I do. I used to. I haven't this year, but I used to take people out the end of April or whenever I thought it would be a good morel time, and I would take a group out. We'd do a class about foraging, and then we'd actually go out and try to find morels. But I haven't this year. The time
Can
just.
I go the next time?
Yes, I will let you know. Yeah, but it's really fun. It's just, think of it as like a slow walk through the woods, and you're just looking down the whole time. That's it. But it helps to be with people. I find that people don't have the confidence to go out because they don't have the knowledge of what they can eat and what they can't.
That's why you take 2 friends with you. The first friend eats it, and you go.
I see, okay.
I didn't say good. I didn't say good friends.
We don't do foraging for chanterelles, but it's included in one of our that we cover. I was still finding chanterelles, well, a few weeks back here in Kansas City. I found some in South Missouri a few days ago, but
And you're
Yeah.
part of the Mycological Society?
I am part of the Missouri Mycological Society. That is a good resource to reach out to. They do forays almost once a month or more. We have a Kansas City chapter, and it's just a group of knowledgeable people to go out and identify not just edible things, but kind of all mushrooms also. But there's also a lot of good edible plants too.
And when you're talking about identifying, I know there's false morels that can kill you if you're not careful.
There are a couple,
Yeah. Okay.
That's why we kind of hold the classes to teach people,
Yeah.
but also like I'm a certified identifier, so people can come to me if they're unsure and just identify for people to be safe.
What would it take if I wanted to get certified? What would I have to do?
So it depends what state you want to do it in. I did mine in Kansas and it's through K-State. They have a class that you just take and then pass a test. And you can get certified. Missouri, the Mycological Society runs all the classes and I think you have to complete it 3 or to 4 and it's over the course of a year. So it's a long process. What's doable? But that's a good group to get with just to go out and get started foraging. Okay, well I will move on to indoor cultivation. So basically we're just cultivating mushrooms in a controlled environment. You can do this in multiple ways. You could use a greenhouse, a basement like I started, hydroponic tents. Just have some kind of dedicated space for the mushrooms. You just need to decide what you want to grow, what's going to grow best in your space, what environmental conditions can you have for that mushroom. You have to sterilize or pasteurize some kind of substrate. A lot of people use straw, sawdust, coffee grounds, or a mixture. I used coffee grounds mixed with sawdust when I first started. You can get coffee grounds from family, friends, coffee shops, or whatever. It's easy to round up, but you got to know how to prepare your substrate. You need some way to get the mushroom mycelium, so spawn or the spores, or liquid culture or auger is popular right now. And then you inoculate and have some kind of incubation space, and then you're fruiting. And I'll cover kind of all of those. I break it down. Bagging and sterilization is kind of one process, and then inoculation, incubation, your fruiting and fruiting rooms, and then your kind of harvest and storage after that. So with the bagging, so you have to decide, there's a couple substrates you can use. So the master's mix is a sawdust and soy hull blend. Soy hulls are just a byproduct of soybean production, which we have a lot of here in Missouri. You can get that in raw material, so you can get raw sawdust, the soy hulls, you can mix it. There's a lot of companies out there that are mixing it already for cultivators, and you can just buy it. It's readily available. Straw, if you have access to straw, it's another good substrate for the gourmet mushrooms. There's still woodlog farms. Shiitakes do well on this method, or coffee grounds. So you need to kind of consider where you're at in the country, what materials can you source? What do you want to use? And like for me here, being an urban farm and being indoors, we have to buy pelletized material. And I'll show you that later on. It's like
You have to buy what?
pelletized. So it's like hardwood fuel pellets. So it's already blended, it's compressed into a little pellet form. It's dried out. So if I would have to use raw sawdust, I would probably be kicked out of here. It's messy, it would sit around, it'd probably bring bugs, it would ferment, all kinds of fun stuff. So the pelletized version is very, very useful for being an urban farm, and it's available as well, and it's organic certified, and the ones we use are made in Missouri also. So we're super lucky that it's right here in the Midwest. And then there's 2 types of bagging that's popular with cultivation. So there's the wet bagging versus the dry bagging. And the difference is whether the material goes in the bag already hydrated with water versus the dry material going in and then the water afterwards. So is it mixed beforehand or is it mixed in the bag? And you have to consider kind of a lot of things for this, because the equipment is going to be very, very different if you want to do wet bagging versus dry bagging. Also space, so things that use like your wet bagging, they're very large pieces of equipment, so it's hard to do if you're at your house, or your basement or something like that. The dry bagging version is more space saving. So what we use, pictured there, so that's our pellets at the top. That's going into the bag, and that's our bagger unit called the fin rear. And we built most of that hopper ourselves. It's very, very small, it's compact, it's against the wall, but it also allows us flexibility. We can expand on that. So we're running 2 of those right now, but we have space to put another 2, so we could do 4, or we could redesign it and have, multiple stations, so we could run like 8 at a time. You can also adjust it depending on the size of bag that you want to make. We do 10-pound bags, but a lot of farms do 5-pound bags also. But we like the 10 pounds one. Kind of maximizes your yield per block. But the pellets just go in our hopper. It spits out the pellets, it weighs it, and then it spits out the water, and then it's mixed in the bag. And there's a little computer in there, and reset it. We're looking for a 60% hydration of our pellets. And so it just does it by weight. It knows 4 pounds of pellets, 6 pounds of water, and it actually is super, super accurate. We've calculated the moisture content, and it's right on 60%. So it's super efficient. I love that system, actually. Okay, is there any questions about the bagging or material? So sterilization, so that'll be your next process in cultivation. So you're gonna put the material in the bags, but then you have to sterilize or pasteurize the material before you introduce the mycelium into it. There's other things in there, other fungi, other bacteria that could grow, and it would outcompete the mycelium, and then you would just have a bag of something you didn't wanted. So you have to sterilize or pasteurize before you introduce it. And there's multiple ways to do this. You can do pressure sterilization, or you can do atmospheric, which doesn't use any pressure at all. We do an atmospheric, so it's called an ultra pasteurization, so we can get temperatures of 212, but we can't go any higher than that. So if you want to get something above 212, you have to add pressure, so like a pressure cooker, right? You also have to consider the cost. Pressure sterilizers are really, really expensive. There's a lot to consider there. Safety also, you're talking about like a boiler system. They're not easy to run. They're very large, they take up a lot of space. But they're very fast and they're efficient. You know you're gonna kill everything off, and you can probably do it in a few hours, right? Versus your atmospheric pasteurization, you gotta run it a little bit longer. It takes longer to get to those temperatures, and you might not kill off everything, so it's not shelf stable, but you need to introduce the mycelium faster versus the sterilization. Yeah.
Well, can't you just like seal them in like pressurized bags, and then like that wouldn't work?
I don't think so. You mean before or after? So we have to, our bags have to be open for the sterilization process, or else they'll bust open because of the...
Have you ever tried sterilization?
They've tried some chemical ones, yeah. I bet that involves some kind of freezing. But when you go to introduce the mycelium, you got to have it room temperature.
Spores are pretty good at dealing with cold, right?
Yeah, you would kill off.
I mean, how cold do you actually have to kill something?
To kill something off?
Like a spore, which don't they packetize?
I don't know. But for your pressure, or your just the sterilization or the pasteurization, getting above 185 usually kills off everything that you want it to. But we try to go to 200 or 212 just to kind of kill off everything. And then you hold it there for an hour and a half, and then that'll be good, because you got to cool down all the bags before you actually inoculate in the lab. So with the bigger sterilizers, the cool down is very, very long. So they might sit there for a few days, and you can only do a few runs per week. So our sterilizers, that's what it looks like there, and I'll show you. It's really like maybe 24 inches long, 20 inches tall. They're really small, but we just hook a hose up to them. They create the steam for us, which we pump into our barrel system. And then we do that for 4 hours, and then we pop it off, put it on our fans to cool down, and then they're ready to go into the lab the next day. So it's a kind of a modular system that we really, really like. We can kind of keep the process of the farm going. We don't have to be down for days at a time waiting for blocks to cool down. The only downside is that we do small batches, which I kind of prefer also. I like doing smaller ones at a time. We just do it every single day. It's just a process at the farm that we do. Every single day we run, our max is 8 barrels a day. So we're looking at, maybe 200 blocks a day we can do versus a giant run of 800 blocks. And then, so that's kind of the good and bad of that. Any other questions?
So you put the bag in a giant steamer.
Yes. And I'll show you all of that.
So like, what about like a food grade pressurized steam? I mean, they're not really cheap either, but they're probably cheaper.
Yeah, some people, I've seen this done many, many ways. This is one thing that there's not a set way to do it. I've seen bread proofers, I think they call them. So I think they got to 190 and they ran them for 24 hours to 36 hours.
Kind of similar to brewery equipment.
It is. I do steal a lot of brewing equipment for my sterilization system. Got to use a lot of stainless. You got to, unhook and hook things up. So I steal a lot of pieces from other industries for cultivation.
I don't know if you want to eat partially processed fry for breakfast the way you can at the brewery.
I don't know.
That's good.
So there's that's the inside look. So we stack our bags in kind of a special way just to let the steam kind of fully engulf all of them. And then on the side there is kind of our barrels with our crazy steamers and fan system. And so these are just food grade 55-gallon barrels that we kind of fit with our fittings. I insulate them just to be more efficient. And that's how we do it. But yeah, you could get a pressure sterilizer. There's one thing on the market that it's like a barrel system, but it has an element at the bottom. There's multiple ways to do this. So after the bags are cooled down from the barrels, we unload them into the lab or a clean room or whatever it is. It's just going to be a clean space. We have HEPA filtered air blowing into the lab, and then we work in front of that flow hood right there. So the idea is to keep any kind of contamination from getting in that bag, because we're going to have to open the bag, and once it's sterilized, it's really sensitive to anything getting in and growing. So we open it in the lab in front of our flow hood. We inoculate with grain spawn, which already has the mycelium on it, and then we seal it with an impulse sealer. And then at that point it can come out of the lab and we mix it. You can see a filter patch there that just allows for gas exchange of oxygen and CO2. So that's Jake working in there. We wear gloves, we have a respirator, anything on you, but it's mostly kind of your breathing, or if you cough or talk, you can actually introduce bacteria into the bags. So we wear respirators in there. Everything is cleaned, it's sprayed down with alcohol before we work with anything. So just knowing that sterile technique is super, super helpful with mushroom cultivation. We try to keep a positive pressure in there, but also laminar flow. So we don't want the air kind of swirling back in the space. We want it to just flow in and flow out, so we have an exhaust at the bottom. Yeah. And that's a lovely picture taken by Andrea, by the way. There, I like this one. This is a good shot. But that's Jake pouring the grain spawn into the bag. So he's opened it up in front of the flow hood. We work as close as possible to the flow hood. He pours the grain inside. It has the mycelium growing on it, and then he'll seal it up. But you could use liquid culture or auger plates. Mycelium grows on various things. But just, again, consider what's readily available, what's affordable. You can make your own grain spawn, but you're talking pieces of equipment like a pressure sterilizer to make. You would need some kind of storage for the liquid culture or the spores. You can make it at your farm. We source from other larger farms that they specialize in making spawn. So we know when we get it in from them that it's going to be quality, it's organic certified, it's not gonna have contamination. So, auger? Yeah, so like a nutrient auger, so it's in a petri dish. And so it's just the nutrients and the mycelium grows on the petri dish. And then they'll just take little slices of it there and put it either in liquid culture and the mycelium will grow in that, or you could go to the grain and it'll grow on the grain. So it's just in a petri dish form. Yeah, so we source it from other farms is how we do it right now. It just makes sense for us. We don't have to have the extra equipment, the added costs to make the spawn.
How much green spawn do you have to add to each bag?
It is, so for a 6-pound bag, we get 20 10-pound substrate bags. I forget the actual, as here we've done it so many times that we know it by shakes. But yeah, 6 pounds will get you 20 10-pound bags, 200 pounds of substrate. And then the bags are sealed, and then we have a homemade mixer. So it's very important to mix the grain spawn throughout the substrate so that the mycelium will grow evenly. You don't want all your spawn in one section of the bag, and it'll be really, really slow to colonize that bag. You could have contamination come in where it's not grown. So it's very important to mix it thoroughly. Once you're done, when we were smaller, we would just hand mix, but as we got larger, it became very, very time consuming and just physically hard to do that many bags in a day. So we built a mixer, which I will show you, that once we're in the lab, we just throw it in the mixer and it mixes it for us, and it does a fantastic job. And it's saved us probably like 10 hours a week or something crazy. But again, that's like a homemade build that we couldn't just go buy one. A lot of equipment for cultivation, you can't just get off the shelf, so we had to build it ourselves. And then, so this is the room that you're actually in right now. That is where we're looking at. But so we've moved everything down, we've took on more space, and so we were able to condense all of our incubation that way and to make more space as we grow in production. Incubation takes up a lot of the space. It's the majority of the space. So everything's gonna sit back here from either 2 to even 6 weeks, just depending on what you wanna grow. And so you need the space. You need to realize, okay, if I have something that's gonna sit for 4 weeks and I'm gonna do this week after week, you can see how it adds up very, very quickly, and you need a lot of space. But it is kind of temperature sensitive. You have more leeway in incubation, but there are varieties that if it's too hot, it won't grow, or if it's too cold, your yields in the fruiting rooms will be low, things like that. So we just keep it kind of room temperature back here. I know it's a little warm on this side, but about 73, 74 is what we try to keep it back here for all of our bags. They are giving off CO2 just like we do. They kind of breathe oxygen, give off CO2. So we do have airflow out the back. And then they are giving off heat, so they're living organisms. As they're growing, they give off heat, so you can actually put your hands between the bag and kind of feel the warmth of it. So as we get more and more bags in a small space, you need to just kind of be mindful that it's going to increase the temperature, and that you may at some point need to either exhaust more air or have some kind of HVAC, temperature controlled space for your incubation space.
So if you're going to start a small, like you did, a small grow in your basement, build it, you pretty much not only have to be a cultivation, you got to be an engineer on top of it, because you're building most of your own equipment.
Yes, so I am a plumber, electrician, HVAC specialist, and a mushroom farmer.
Don't call AAA on the Oregon Trail.
Nope, something breaks, it's me, I fix it. So, but I've enjoyed that about mushroom cultivation. That's one thing that I get to learn new things. Something breaks, I can jump in and fix it. And now, I have employees that I'm trying to teach that to as well. Like, hey, you can do electronics. Huh?
YouTube was your best friend to figure out how to build some of this stuff.
And my dad.
Yeah.
My dad taught me how to weld. He's a plumber. So I'll call my dad and, hey dad, this is what's going on. What do you think it is? Tell me how to fix it, and I'll do it.
Like the ones you can get on Amazon, the mushroom boxes, you spray them down and they grow.
Yeah, not like that at all. So, if you go through all of that and they're finally ready in your incubation, you get to put them in the fruiting rooms, and that's where you make a cut in the bag, and that will vary depending on what variety you're growing. But we cut the bag open. It senses the air, it senses the humidity. It tells the mycelium that, okay, we've exhausted our resources. It's time to grow mushrooms, to kind of release spores, create that life cycle over again. So inside the fruiting rooms, what we control is the humidity, temperature, and kind of our airflow. So humidity is very, very important for mushrooms. You can keep between 85 to 95% humidity. Temperature, again, that varies with variety. Everything that we grow here with the gourmets, we keep about 60 degrees, but they'll do fine at 70. You have some strains that are warm weather strains, so you really need to know and identify what is going to grow best. Like a lot of people love the pink oysters. They're very beautiful. They're pink, but it's a warm weather strain, and so you got to have the warmer temperatures to grow those. So here we keep 60 degrees for all our oysters, our lion's mane, chestnut, things like that. And then airflow. So they're going to give off CO2. So we're putting hundreds of bags in a small space. They're going to build up CO2 really, really fast. And so we're monitoring that all the time. We have a monitor inside the room, so we know what it's doing. And if CO2 gets high, the mushrooms will grow weird, or they won't grow at all, or you'll get different contaminations that show up when CO2 is high. So we always keep that monitored, and we know if we need to adjust our airflow according to what it's doing. We like to keep positive pressure in our grow rooms, just so when you open the door, it'll blow out. You don't really suck the air in. And so it's really just the challenge of kind of balancing all those conditions. It's really hard to have, high airflow, but also keep humidity up and keep your temperature controlled. So it's always a balancing act of, okay, do I need less airflow, more airflow? If I increase my airflow, I got to increase my humidity. So all those things kind of go hand in hand, and just fully understanding that is really helpful. And then, of course, whatever system for humidification that you're using can be a source of contamination. So keeping it clean, keeping it treated is big, also very important. So one setup is
Do you have to pH the water in the humidifiers like you do for other plants?
We do not pH, no. And I'll show you one of our systems. We have a filter, so an anti-scale system hooked up to some of our humidifiers and things. Yeah. So one setup, kind of how I started, is the hydroponic tents. Super easy to just pop one up in a lot of different spaces. They're inexpensive. You can kind of create that micro environment.
They grow all over the whole cube.
Yeah, so that's the shiitakes. That's how they grow. So that's another one. You got to take it fully out of the bag, but that's the only one that you do that for, versus just cutting it open. So those are singular mushrooms, so you got to have that block fully on the shelf. Harvesting those are really labor intensive. You got to cut each one of the mushrooms off. But everyone loves shiitakes, it seems like. Yeah, I have a cake decorator that I put and then spin it, and then we chop it out. We got really good at harvesting shiitakes.
They're disciplinary technique.
Yeah. We got really good. I think it was like 2 minutes a block. We could do shiitakes really, really fast. But yeah, so they're pretty inexpensive. You can put them anywhere. The only problem with these is they just don't have the longevity. They fall apart. If you're using them every day, constantly in and out, they have zippers for doors, and I can show you this. The zippers break, the material kind of will wear out on the floor. But they're probably good for at least 2 years or so to get started. That's how I started. But if you want to kind of scale it up, you'll have to buy more and more. So it's just that redundancy in equipment. So now you need another humidifier. Now you need more fans, more racks, more ducting, more everything. But they come in a variety of sizes as well. 4x4. I think they make them like 20 by 16 now, like a giant one. So they're in varying sizes. But you can move them around also. That's one thing I liked about them. If I needed to, I moved them from my basement to up here when I first started. So you can break them down and you can move them if need be. But they are really, really hard to clean. That was probably the biggest thing for me, is that if you look at the floor, there's all these crevices, there's seams, there's all sorts of things that just under the shelves. It was really hard to clean them. So here is one of our fruiting rooms. So you can construct them. So this was just an open warehouse space. We constructed rooms. You can use shipping containers. I've seen a couple of like old refrigerated semi-truck trailers that people are converting to farms as well. Any kind of space that you can control would work. So we hooked up kind of that anti-scale water filter system. It goes to a UV sterilizer, and then it's pneumatic, so it's hooked up to the air compressor, and then we do a high pressure mist nozzle kind of in the middle of this room, just to try and do away with the old style humidifiers. It's supposed to be more efficient, but also less contamination. We don't have to take that apart and clean it. And we built the walls out of chloroplast, so it's just corrugated plastic. They're super lightweight. It's really cheap, but also you can go in and just hose this down. You can clean it, which was one thing that I liked about it. It's super easy to work with, so it comes in 8x4 sheets, so you can put up walls really easy. We now have our ceilings are the chloroplast also, but they're just easier to run day by day. There's less labor involved in the grow rooms versus like your tents and things like that.
Use any UV for disinfectant?
Yeah, so that long silver kind of cylinder in that picture, that's a UV sterilizer. So the water goes through the anti-scale filter, and then it goes through the UV sterilizer, and then it goes to our room after that. So we were building it, that was the second one that we built, a little bit bigger than the first one, but still the same concept, chloroplast walls, ceilings. So the fruiting times, it's important to know and understand that, because it's all different for each variety, for each mushroom. And then you can even break it down. Like we have multiple strains of our blue oyster. So not just the blue oyster, but which strain are we growing? Actually, the fruiting time changes per strain by a day to 4 days. So mushrooms grow really, really fast. We harvest daily here at the farm. You can't skip a day because mushrooms will overgrow in about like 6 hours sometimes is all it is for a mushroom to be ready versus overgrown. And then if you have an overgrown mushroom, the shelf life is actually shortened considerably. So it's very important to harvest almost a little before they're ready or right on time. And so that's why we keep data on everything. So we track what everything is doing and what our kind of average harvest time is so that we know when to open. So one of the hardest parts about farming is your schedule and your timeline. So if we want fresh mushrooms on Thursday or Friday, we need to know exactly when to open those blocks. But they're still a living organism. They kind of do what they want, but we can get the majority of our blocks to be on time. And then you kind of have those outliers a few days before and a few days after. But at least we know we'll have the majority of our crop on a certain day or within a day or two. Because if we have something on a Saturday, that doesn't really help us out. All of our orders go out Monday through Friday, and then we go to farmers markets on Saturdays. So we need those mushrooms and we want them to be fresh. So everything is, you know, hopefully no older than a day or two before when we're sending it out to our customers. The shelf life is different for all those as well. But that one's super, super important to, I always recommend collect data on it. So write down when you open your block, when it's harvested, and then you'll get a better idea of, okay, is this a 6-day mushroom or is it a 14-day mushroom? And then harvest and storage. So mushrooms, they don't take up a lot of space in the grow rooms growing, but once you harvest them, boy, do they take up a lot of refrigerated space. So as soon as we harvest, they have to go in the walk-in cooler. And it's very, very easy to not have enough space or run out of space if you grow too many. But we just go in, we have everything facing out on our racks for the most part, so we can just go in quickly and kind of harvest. We actually pull the blocks out of the room, but then harvest quickly off of the racks, and they go into crates, and then everything is weighed and logged, and then it goes right into the walk-in cooler. But yeah, that's just another aspect to kind of consider with mushroom farming is, do I have enough refrigerated space? What does 40 pounds look like versus 400 pounds? It's very, very different, I'd say. And then just the other things to kind of consider, there's a lot of maintenance. So you have a lot of mechanical things that are running. It's going to break all the time. So you kind of have to enjoy troubleshooting and fixing things. We have, just a preventative maintenance schedule. So we go through all of our equipment. So our fans, our humidifiers, our mini splits for our walk-in cooler, for the rooms, even our steamers, everything is kind of maintenance on a schedule just to prevent it from breaking down the best we can. Because if something breaks down, your production is down. Or if your fruiting room is down, you could ruin that entire batch of blocks. There's a lot of cleaning, so everything needs to be really, really clean, like your fruit room, your lab. So it has to be on a schedule for cleaning as well. All your humidifiers cleaned. And then also, you're not just a farmer, but if you want to start growing, like you're a business owner now, so that's a whole another thing that you'll be taking on. Time management is super, super important, just because if we're making a block or if a customer wants a big order, depending on what they want, we have to schedule that 3 to 4 weeks in advance, right? So we got to make the blocks, we have to incubate it, we have to grow it, and then we have to harvest and then get it out to our customers. So fully understanding the life cycle of all your varieties, like how long is it going to sit in incubation, how long will it sit in the fruiting room, when do I need to make these blocks is important. And then they have a short shelf life, oysters, maybe 7 days, lion's mane, shiitake chestnut, you can maybe get 2 weeks if it's harvested early in the walk-in. So everything here is a weekly process. We harvest, we send it out to our customers. Anything left over, we're able to donate it to a couple places, but then the next week we start over fresh.
What do you do with the blocks? I mean, you've harvested and everything. Is it recycled, or is it
Sort of.
waste?
So if you have the space and the block looks healthy, it'll grow again. It's just your yield is going to be reduced each time. A lot of the strains that are made for commercial growing right now are made to kind of give you, it's called the flush, so that first flush, and then it kind of will reduce itself after that. So you might get 2 pounds your first flush, and then the next one might be half a pound or a quarter pound or something like that. But it'll regrow, because the mycelium is still in there, it's still healthy. As long as it has enough humidity, it'll regrow. But for us, since we don't have the space to just let them set, we pull all those out, and then it's just, we call it compost. And a lot of farmers, urban farmers, they pick it up from us and they spread it back on their fields. Okay. So we have like bee farmers, pumpkin farmers, worm farmers. I have people, like every Monday or Wednesday, they've scheduled with me for like the next few months. They'll pick up everything we have and they use it for like their compost. It'll accelerate compost. So a lot of like no-till agriculture, regenerative agriculture, you need to use compost. Put mushroom mycelium in there, it'll speed it up. And so for us, we just give it away.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of like you didn't. I was like, a big old dumpster in the back where you just dump all this stuff.
No.
And take it out to a burn pit or something.
Yeah, no, it's all. It's organic matter. It's organic certified material. It's great for soil health. So we're lucky. A lot of people actually want it. So we actually have more people that want blocks. So
do you do each of these blocks to order, or do you do like a large?
We try to overproduce, we do. But we have like some farms that we support, so we have their orders plus what we want to grow, and then we try to do some extra, but not too many because we don't want them sitting in incubation too long. So we try to just have so we call it insurance. So say we have a batch go down or something like that, we have at least some in our back stock that we could pull from in fruit. Mm-hmm. But otherwise, we're pretty close to the orders. Yeah.
How many farms are you supplying right now?
I think 4 or 5. Yeah.
You think there's more room in Kansas City for farms? Mushroom farms?
Probably, yeah. I think so. It's a town the size of Kansas City, maybe 3 or 4 big farms.
You get good recipes.
Yeah, do we have some? Yeah, we tried to compile a bunch of recipes. That's one question we get asked probably the most at farmers markets is, how do you cook this? Or what do you cook it with? Yeah, what do I? Or my favorite, is this edible? What? No. Yeah, it's edible. What is it? Looks like cauliflower. Is it like a lion's mane? Looks like cauliflower. And then how do I cook it?
You could ask if they're special mushrooms.
Yes, yeah. So all of my market people, I think I used to give them a list of like answers for that question, right? Because like, hey, where's the funny mushrooms? Or do you sell the magic mushrooms? Or whatever it is. And my line is always, I just sold out. Like 5 minutes ago, man, I would have had them.
Now, it's actually become a budding market, like cannabis is now.
Sure.
You know, that psilocybin is being used in therapies and such.
Mhm.
Would that be something that, not necessarily you, but that you would support other mushroom farmers and say, you know, knock yourself out. You know, this is now being proven and done, doing research on what, you know, go ahead and grow it. Would you be in there with that, or are you kind of?
No, I do support it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that.
Thank you.
I noticed that very quickly.
Yep. So we support. There's a group called Psychedelic Missouri. If you're interested in it, they're lobbying for laws to fund research for veterans and first responders, just for, you know, just for research.
And the
Like,
state
let's
of
start there.
Colorado's already doing it.
Yeah.
They've opened up centers where you can go and have that trip, if you will, under supervised conditions. So I'm kind of wondering if this bleeds over in the other states. You know, is there going to be enough support for it in the cultivation to support?
Yeah, it depends on the laws.
Yeah.
Is it going to be like cannabis? We don't know. Does it have to be grown in state, or
Yeah,
where are they going to get it?
cannabis is forever changing. I mean, what's legal today or what's illegal today for dispensaries will be legal tomorrow. I mean, they're already working on descheduling it down to Schedule 3 instead of Schedule 1.
Yep.
So,
And our first step is let's just fund research and,
yeah.
and see if there's something there.
I'm definitely.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's about, yeah. So our farm here, one thing I like about it is it's modular. I've kind of built it literally from the ground up from my house, and then just moved in here and took on space as, you know, I took on more and more customers, kind of grew my business that way into a larger farm. So we're the largest farm, I think, in the Kansas City area. And I believe I'm the only woman-owned commercial mushroom farm in the state. So that was one of my goals. There's just a handful in the country, which is crazy. I feel like there should be more.
More women in the kitchen. Sorry.
But there's a lot of modern technology that can help make an urban mushroom farm, right? There's all those pieces that exist if you just want to, you just gotta like building things yourself. But it's super rewarding. You know, it requires less space than traditional crops. You know, we can do, I think our grow space is 500 square feet, right? And we can do 1,000 pounds a week right now. Mushrooms are getting more and more popular, and hopefully we can kind of keep going with that and have more gourmet mushrooms. Like in the grocery stores is one of our goal, right? Just having people have access to lion's mane. That's one reason I started growing also, was I couldn't find lion's mane or trumpets or anything. Like at the grocery store, I had to go down to like the China market. But just getting more access to gourmet mushrooms is kind of one of our goal. But that is the thing to consider if you're going to rent a space. Plus the things that I've asked to do to this building, you know, I figured he would say no, but he's actually been really reasonable and always been really willing to compromise with me on certain things. Like if I have to have this, he's like, well, okay, just do it or whatever. But on the other side, I am under scrutiny of the city of North Kansas City. You know, I have fire inspections.